So tell me, what happened when you decided to leave the Times?
Well,
I mean, how did you come to, I'd like the story. How did you
yeah.
come to that decision?
Well, there was a kind of forced ideological conformity that was happening. And it became like a battle to get any piece through that didn't conform to the narrative. And anything that didn't
And how would that
conform
battle manifest itself? So you
in
would commission
all
a
kinds of
story.
ways. In all kinds of ways. Yeah. I mean, it would be, I'd like to do a column on this, and me being tremendously like having to jump through hoops and get 10 more sources, whereas other pieces from other writers would just sail through with like obvious embarrassing errors.
Mm.
Not that I haven't had my own share of errors. I have, and they're
Mm-hmm.
horrifically embarrassing, and anyone can find them online. But I'm saying, if you didn't comport with the orthodoxy, then your character, and your work were just unbelievably scrutinized in a way that another person's weren't. When it came to
So the load increased, the effort load
yeah, I mean, when it came
increased.
to commissioning things, like I, you know, I remember Ayan, her CLE, called me the smuggler, because early on when I was there, again, in this very brief, good period of self-reflection, I was able to get an op-ed that she wrote into the New York Times. And she was like, I can't believe you were able to do that. So there was this brief period in the beginning where the humiliation of getting Trump wrong, I think, led to an opening of the Overton window. But then, for reasons I can't really figure out, it really, really, really just closed again, and it narrowed much more so, like to a sliver in a way. It was much narrower than I would say pre the election. And of course, Trump had a tremendous amount to do with it. If you believed that, you know, and I think a lot of my colleagues genuinely believed this, that Trump was a fundamental threat to America, to the republic, to minorities, we can go on and on and on. We know the argument, we could read it anywhere else. Then you were morally obligated to defeat that threat. And that meant that anything that flirted with any number of topics where he was on a particular side of it, then the right was all the correct position was always to be on the opposite side of it. And so you saw this really, really clearly, let's say, in the lab leak theory, right, which was completely of the Wuhan of coronavirus, which increasingly it seems like the coronavirus was, unintentionally, let's say, leaked from this lab in Wuhan. Well, that became unsayable, and it became unsayable because people in the Trump administration were saying that that was the case. And so everything was seen through the prism of this incredibly singular figure of Trump. So that sped it all up. And then you had the summer, and you had the killing of George Floyd. And that just brought everything that was sort of at a low boil just absolutely bubbling over. And the way that it bubbled over most acutely was in the choice in June to run an op-ed by Republican Senator Tom Cotton that said not that the National Guard should be brought in to quell peaceful protests, but that the National Guard should be brought in to quell violent rioting. It was a controversial piece by any stretch in that really sensitive moment. But it was a view, frankly, that was shared by the majority of Americans, if you go back and look at polls at that time. But inside the context, the rarefied context of the New York Times, not only was this op-ed seen as controversial, it was seen as literal violence. Literal violence. More than 800 of my colleagues signed a letter saying that this op-ed literally put the lives of Black New York Times staffers in danger. And anyone that didn't...
What was the argument? What kind of argument was made in favor of that position?
That the argument was, first of all, it was a misreading of his op-ed. It was based on a fundamental misreading that insisted that his op-ed was about bringing in the military to put down justified, understandable riots in reaction to George Floyd. So they never made the distinction. They collapsed the distinction between bringing in the National Guard to put down violent rioting and bringing in the National Guard to put down peaceful protests. And then they said, that because police and the military are systemically racist, I'm being crude and just sort of giving you the overview, that this move would necessarily result in an inordinate amount of Black death, the death of Black Americans. So that was the argument.